All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Smaha, and I am Manomet's Director of Marketing and Communications. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're new to Manomet, we are a nonprofit that uses science and collaboration to strengthen bird habitats and coastal ecosystems across the Western Hemisphere. For over 50 years, we have worked together with businesses, stakeholders, educators, and our supporters to help nature and local communities thrive together. We believe that education is one of the best tools to create long-term change, especially on the big problems facing all of us, like climate change. 5 years ago, we launched our U360 Business Sustainability Internship Program, which provides experiential education opportunities and career training to connect sustainability with the workplace. Today, we're pleased to host some of our U360 partners for what we hope will be a very engaging conversation about the skills that young professionals need to make change in the world. I have just a couple of quick things to share with you before we begin. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a box marked Q&A. If you don't see it, use your mouse pointer to hover over the bottom and it should appear. If at any point during today's presentation you have a question, please feel free to click on that Q&A box and enter it. We will answer as many questions as we can throughout today's presentation. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, please make sure to note that with your question. There's also a chat feature, and please feel free to use that to share with us where you're joining from, or any additional advice that you might have to share on any particular question. Finally, if you're unable to stay for today's entire presentation, it is being recorded. We will send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording in the next day or so. And please feel free to share that with anybody else in your network that you feel might find it enjoyable. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First off, we have Laura Babb, who is our U360 program manager here at Manomet. We have Terry Giddens, who is a career program manager for the Posse Foundation. Josh Iannuzzi, Director of Career Services at New Jersey City University, and Maria Bowie, Program Specialist from Northern Border Regional Commission, and also an alum of our U360 program. So thank you all for joining us today. Now I'd like to ask you the first question. So, and if our panelists will give a little wave whenever they're going to take the question. So focusing on your current role, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your path to this position? Great.
All right, I guess I'll go first. So yeah, my name is Marina Bowie, and I currently work as the program specialist for the Northern Border Regional Commission. I'm one of 2 program specialists, and then we have a senior program specialist. And part of that work involves serving communities in the Northern Border region in Maine, New Hampshire, New York, and Vermont to fund projects that are innovative and infrastructure projects, all kinds of economic development projects that help to sustain rural communities in our region. And so I grew up in Vermont, you know, have family in New York, and often traveled to Maine. So this is a region that's close to heart for me. Went to school in New Hampshire, studied at UNH Economics and Sustainability, and did Laura's U360 program, Manomet's U360 program. And shortly thereafter school, got my first job in Portland, Maine, as a program associate for a trade association, BioBase Maine, working to promote the sustainable use of Maine biomass, primarily wood, to manufacture bio-based products. And now I'm at the commission, so it's very nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. I am Terry Giddens. Prior to joining the Posse Foundation, I was in education as a teacher, primarily as doing programs, department head of social studies departments, and I was there for telling my age a little bit, about 16 or so years. So I was teaching for a very, very long time. And then I decided I needed a change of pace. And so I joined the Posse Foundation as the career program manager. And I've been here since 2017. I skipped a lot of experience in between that because I decided to stop teaching well before I actually joined the Posse Foundation. So I was a field director at a small tutoring company that serviced the Atlanta Public Schools, which is where I started my career. Won't tell you when, but I started my career at Atlanta Public Schools. So being a field director for a program that served them was quite rewarding. So did a little bit of that. Had a stint where, again, staying in education, where I was a lead teacher for another nonprofit, because I just can't seem to get out of education. So I was a lead teacher there, assisted them with making programs primarily for career development for their students. So a lot of things in between teaching and while teaching. For a minute, I was doing full-time teaching and then doing part-time teaching right after I left the school building. So again, very insane person here that wants to do teaching all day long. So but yeah, so again, for about 16 years, I did teach in that capacity, field director, lead teacher, all of that within that 16 years. And then coming to the Posse Foundation, I've been here since 2017. Really enjoy working with young people and partners and things of that sort. So quick spin about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. Josh?
Sure. So I majored in communications, public relations. I had an interest in sports writing, but the first job that came to me that I landed was in sales and marketing for a beverage company. I got to travel the country, pick up new skills and experiences and network, but I wasn't passionate about that work that I was doing. Simultaneously, I was volunteering for the Obama campaign. This was in the primaries of 2008. And less than 6 months later, I gave up, I gave my 2 weeks notice to the beverage company, and I took a position with the Obama campaign. I was using a lot of the same skills that I had with the previous work, but instead of selling and promoting, a product, I was pushing an idea and a candidate, for public office. And, I found that this work, while it was grueling and, we were working 14, 15, 18-hour days, at times, I found that it, was the most rewarding. And it, didn't pay as well. But again, at the end of the day, just felt good about the work that I was doing, waking up, was fired up and excited to continue doing the work. And that experience, it helped to confirm, my future career aspirations, to transition to more of a career in service. And it also connected me to a network that connected me to my passion, which is workforce development, which is what I do now. So I probably should have started with that. I am currently the Director of Career Services at the NJCU School of Business. So I help to prepare and connect our students and alumni to internships, employment, professional development type of opportunities. But yeah, that network through the campaign actually connected me to that first job in workforce development through like an alumni network. I saw a job opportunity, initially applied, and started out as a grant writer, but transitioned to a job developer. And that's where, again, I kind of really found, a passion, for the work that I was doing. But I think the lesson there is also, sometimes you have to take opportunities. They might not be exactly what you're looking for or what you had in mind, but you never know, what doors they can open up, what opportunities can then become available. And after that, I transitioned to working with, formerly incarcerated populations, doing the back to work type of, job development type of work, and then to higher ed. And I love higher ed. I think higher ed is a great place to be. Again, it's just it's exciting to work with students who are passionate about, starting their career, and it's important work. So I love it and happy to be where I'm at.
That's great. Thank you all so much for being here. It's exciting to hear your backstories too. So I'm Laura Babb. I work at Manomet. I direct our U360 Business Sustainability Internship Program. And my career path is quite convoluted, so I'll just sort of synthesize to the most relevant. But I grew up in Maine and graduated from College of the Atlantic with a degree in human ecology. It's a really small, very small, like 300 students on an island, small liberal arts college, kind of focused on environmental science and sustainability. And as I was approaching graduation, I made the decision that I wanted to turn my senior project into potentially my career. And so my senior project was sort of a consumer education, public awareness project, educating people about everyday toxins in consumer products. And it sort of grew out of a personal health experience that I had had. And I made the decision to start a nonprofit out of college. So as I was starting my nonprofit, I made the decision in just enough time to do an independent study on how to start a nonprofit, because I did not study business or anything. And so it was an incredible experience. It was a lot of work, but it was amazing. And during that time, I also needed a job. So I got a job at a restaurant that was in the area that served local and organic natural food, because that was something I really cared about. And within a few months, I applied for a position they had for a director of marketing. And I did that for many years. And that sort of evolved into director of marketing and sustainability. And that's when I first learned about the triple bottom line approach to business management, that businesses could also be a force for good. They weren't just the enemy to environmentalists, which I was sort of taught in school. And so eventually I went on to get my master's degree from Vermont Law School, a master's of environmental law and policy, because I wanted to sort of better understand the entire system. I'd worked with businesses, I'd worked with individuals, and I wanted to understand the system that governs us and regulates the work that I was trying to do. And kind of in the time in between, I also worked for an organization that greens the music industry. So working with major label touring musicians and bands. So in some form or another, I've been in environmental sustainability in the for-profit sector, nonprofit sector for a number of years, and I'm not going to mention, because Terry didn't have to, I'm not going to say how many years either. And then I did a lot of work with small businesses over the years. And when I ran my nonprofit, one of my target audiences were college students, and I really loved working with that age group around sustainability, because it's a time in their life where they're making their consumer choices for the first time, and really just eager to learn as much as they can about the world around them. And so after getting my master's degree, I was hired by Manomet to help launch a newly formed project that we had created called Route 360 for small businesses. And the idea was to help the 6 million small businesses in this country evaluate and improve their sustainability and reduce their environmental footprint, because they collectively have a large environmental footprint, but often don't have the resources to prioritize sustainability. So I had this thought that maybe college students might be able to help us reach more small businesses. And I sort of turned that more into what U360 is today. So kind of along the way, as I was designing the program, I also thought a lot about the skills that young people need to do work in this field. And as we're facing the massive challenges that we're facing, like climate change and everything that comes with it, we need more and more people in this field. We need people from diverse perspectives and experiences. And so I thought that combining the outreach to the businesses with a really sort of experiential education, enriching internship program, professional development program would help students get both the real world knowledge about how sustainability actually works, but then also the professional skills that would get them hired right out of school and start doing the work that we all really need people to do. So that's, and we're just celebrated our 5th anniversary of U360, and we'll talk more about that program later, I'm sure. So
Laura, you're talking about skills, and I think that's a good transition into kind of the main topic of today's webinar, which is how can today's college students and young professionals gain these valuable professional skills? So I was wondering if you could all touch upon, so what are the soft skills that you feel today's young professionals need to make change in their workplace? And most importantly, how can they develop these skills? Thanks, Terry.
I said, I guess I'll go, and I'm on mute. Nobody heard that. I definitely want to say there are a lot of soft skills out there that people take for granted are really necessary in business. I think communication and the way to communicate in different ways, especially since COVID hit. Yay, COVID! So now we know that we need to be able to communicate not just in person, but we have to be able to communicate digitally. And so writing skills they've always been important over the past few years. That's one of the main complaints that a lot of businesses have voiced, that a lot of the persons that are in their professions, they don't have the writing skills that are necessary to properly communicate on the business level that they need to. And so that's something that they've had to invest in helping their employees improve upon. So writing skills, public speaking skills, but just communication, the simple things that we take for granted. So for example, just simply how to greet someone. A lot of times with our scholars, their emails come across not exactly how they mean for them to come across. So that's another thing that that I think is really important for young professionals to pay attention to. So all the different levels of communication are essential. I already mentioned writing. And then something else, I'm always studying on different things that corporations need, just the nature of the business that I do. And networking is something that terrifies a lot of people by name, but it's really not as complicated as we make it seem, because there are different ways that you can network. And especially in a time that we're living right now, I think that's incredibly essential, because in networking, there's a lot of skills that you can build and that you can learn that you need to build just by having a simple conversation with someone. And it doesn't have to be someone that is, that has a title and has a profile on LinkedIn that you have to follow because they have 1,000,005 followers. Networking could be something as simple as talking to your cousin that just so happens to be in a business field. They have a position in a company, they're an employee, or they're an employer, they know some things. So it could be something just that simple, just having a conversation, to give it the strategic name, informational interview with people that are in your personal network. And I think those are some very simple things that anyone can do to improve the soft skills that businesses are looking for. So technical skills are great, but there are some that say, hey, hire the person and then train the employee. And I think that is something that a lot of corporations, especially now, are really leaning to, because having to communicate the way that we're having to communicate now, primarily virtually, then when you see someone in person, how do you translate that? So I think if I had to pick one particular skill, I would say communication. And then if I had to pick a second, I would say collaboration, which of course falls in line with communication. But I can't think of a single industry where you don't have to collaborate with someone that is not in your same either department or same realm. So at the Posse Foundation, my department is me. It's just me. I'm the only person in my department. So in order to do the work that I do, because I have to put on events and things of that sort, I literally cannot do it alone. So I have to collaborate with my staff in Atlanta, but I also have to collaborate with staff that's national. So we're talking about different regions, we're talking about different perspectives, we're talking about different cultures. So being able to not only communicate and collaborate, but also to understand that people of different backgrounds, of different cultures, of different geographical, dispersed geographically, they're going to have a different perspective. And that's a beautiful thing, because that broadens the horizons that you have. No matter how well-traveled you are, it's always someone that has seen something that you haven't seen, that have done something that you haven't done. And that really strengthens the work that anyone is doing. And so you have to excuse me, I'm a research nerd. So, so I'll just generally say that there's research to back up the fact that teams that are diverse in nature, both not just geographically, but diverse in nature, not just demographically either, but just in perspective and things of that sort, they're way more productive than teams that are not. So again, being able to network, collaborate, communicate, especially on a diverse nature, that's incredibly important. And then I'll hush, because otherwise I'll talk until Christmas 2025. So.
Terry, I have to second that. Communication. I mean, you can't get your foot in the door and get the interview if you're not even communicating. So that's got to be number one. And you hit all the reasons. I think, if you're looking for ways to improve or I think Laura, you mentioned this to the students all the time. We mentioned, if you don't have Grammarly, download the Grammarly app and that'll check, you know, like your grammar and typos and stuff like that, and help to improve that in some of your correspondence. So do that. Also, you know, have either, you know, a professor or a writing center staff member, or just even a friend, family member, review important documents before you're sending them out, because that extra set of eyes can pick something out that maybe you didn't see. I can't tell you how many times I personally have written something, and you know, you look at it so often you become numb to it, and then there's, like, you know, it can be a blatant error right in front of you and you miss it because you're numb to the document. So yeah, utilizing, you know, the resources that are available to you. So yeah, communication number one. But I'm going to share in the chat, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, has a list of 8 competencies, career readiness competencies, that employers report being, you know, really important, or the most important. And I believe they're outlined in order. And so they typically rank critical thinking as number one. I still think and agree, Terry, with you on communication being number one. But all of those competencies are really important. And you can gain those competencies through an internship, through a volunteer experience, through a part-time job. It doesn't even have to be a job in your industry. It could be, you know, in retail or food service. Those skills are transferable. And so it's all about kind of, you know, matching those skills to the new jobs and internships or opportunities that you're applying to. But, you know, any and every employer is going to want somebody who communicates well, who collaborates well, as Terry had mentioned, you know, who's good at critical thinking. So yeah, check out that list and consider how you can incorporate that into your learning.
That was a great volley to me, Josh, because the U360 curriculum is focused specifically on the NACE competencies, so helping college students develop the skills that employers are most seeking. So, I mean, I'm going to be repetitive, and I'm going to third the communication. Like, there's no question that I think communication is one of the most important, and definitely everything that Josh and Terry said in terms of the quality of your communication. So making sure that you, especially, yeah, writing is hugely important, but phone communication, verbal communication, and whatnot. So in U360, the first 6 weeks of the program is our career training period. And I literally have a workshop on the do's and don'ts of written and verbal communication. And it's like, just, you know, all laid out. And a lot of students come in thinking that they knew a lot about communication. They're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to address emails that way, or, you know, check for this. And so and I always just stress that this is your opportunity to make your first impression. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And if you have typos in your cover letter, or you, you know, are way too casual in your initial email to a prospective employer, like, that can make or break you even getting looked at. And so communication is huge. And then I would say the other one is creative problem solving. That's one of the ones on the, I agree. I totally agree with collaboration as well. But creative problem solving, that's one I actually hear a lot from employers, of things that they're not seeing as much with the younger generation, and wondering why that is. And, you know, I don't know if it's because we all have the answers to everything we need right at the, you know, tip of our fingertips with the internet, but like, that's one thing that I would really suggest, is developing skills to kind of, yeah, solve different problems or figure your way out of questions and things. Creative problem solving is also a huge part of collaboration. But I would say, you know, definitely what Josh said about ways to develop these skills. Internship, I mean, this is what internships are for when you're in college. These are not typically skills that are incorporated into academic curriculums. And so getting that real world professional experience, whether it's, you know, an internship or a fellowship, or, like Josh said, a volunteer opportunity. I would also, you know, encourage you to look at the courses that are available at your school, like take a public speaking class, even if it's not part of your major. Like, if you have options for electives, do that. Utilize your writing center, utilize your career center. That's huge. That there are resources on your campus that are really designed specifically for helping you enter the workforce and be the strongest candidate and employee you can be when you leave college. So, you know, really utilize those resources would be my biggest recommendation. And, you know, apply for U360 if you're a college student, obviously.
Yeah, Marina.
I'll just go really quickly, because you all kind of said everything that really needs to be said, but communication skills for sure. And then I would just also add some understanding of kind of like social psychology, and I don't mean that super scientifically, but more just that, and I kind of learned this the hard way, not to kind of rush into the business of things when you have a meeting with someone, but instead kind of try to connect with them on a personal level, whether it's a meeting or just with your colleagues. It kind of, well, first of all, I've heard that studies show that when you have like a personal connection with someone, it boosts your own happiness. So the bonus. And then it also just creates a solid foundation connection for a working relationship that kind of extends beyond the first meeting.
Excellent. So Maureen, I'm going to follow up with you. But I think you've probably been in the professional world the shortest of our panelists today, and have the most recent experience with internships. I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what kind of you learned doing your internships, especially as it relates to soft skills that you've been applying in your career so far?
Yeah, well, Laura spoke to this a little bit, just through the U360 program specifically. There's a lot of training with communication and emails, just making sure that you are making a good impression on the people that you're speaking to. And I noticed in college that, you know, I wasn't writing emails a lot. That could have changed in the past year when you have to submit assignments online and all. And I didn't find that group projects were a good kind of simulation for working with colleagues. So definitely taking advantage of internships and treating the people that you work with in your internships not as student peers, but more as practicing treating them as colleagues and setting the professional kind of environment within that space is really helpful. And then also in my intern experience, I learned, you know, one, how to be a good professional to some extent, or how to be a good worker, but also what I wanted from my employers, which I thought was incredibly beneficial. I have heard in the past from a boss of mine that, you know, your employer is supposed to train you in a way that you can leave, but treat you so that you don't want to leave. And that has been a really good guiding principle for me as I move through my career. It's looking for a space where, you know, I want to come to work every day and I feel really good about the work that I do. Does that answer your question?
It does. That's very, very interesting. And I guess my question then, going over to Josh and Terry. So have you heard from employers recently about what kind of skills they are hoping that people in their entering their career for the first time should have developed already?
I think, you know, not to be redundant, but I think, again, those competencies are really things that, you know, are skills that employers are seeking. So I definitely encourage everyone to check that out. But in general, you know, I think, you know, experience is the most important thing that employers are looking for. You know, getting good grades and a high GPA, it's good, you know, it's important, but, you know, very few employers are going to be looking into your transcript, you know, seeing, you know, how you did in calculus, but they are going to want to know what sort of experience you have, and how you can relate that to the positions that you're applying for, you know. And so experience, you know, I think is just, you know, you can get it, as I mentioned before, in so many different ways, whether it's interning, whether it's volunteering, you know, part-time work, full-time work, whatever it is. Just get involved, join a club or an organization and get involved, and you'll start to pick up those competencies, you know, that are listed, you know, by NACE. And you also build and grow your network. I think a few of my colleagues here had mentioned how collaborating and networking is so important. So by doing all that, you're building and you're growing your network, and that will open up doors for you down the line. You know, you might not see it initially, but you never know, years down the line, that individual that you connected with, could open up a door and help you, get hired, with their organization. How to network or how to maintain that network, I think also utilize LinkedIn, to your advantage. And I don't know, that might come up later, but LinkedIn is a great way to track those contacts. Hope I didn't go too far off on.
No, excellent.
Josh, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just thinking LinkedIn. So, but it's definitely a good way to connect. But Danielle, as far as your question is concerned, I 100% agree with Josh. The way to get those skills, experience first. Yes, experience is definitely one of those things that you hear a lot of. I have seen that a lot of corporations recognize it as somewhat unreasonable to ask a 20-year-old to give you, 30 years of experience. Just something about the math doesn't add up there. So they're starting to realize that they're asking for youth on one end and experience in years that is just not possible for young professionals to have. So I'm seeing a lot of corporations do rotationals. So that's one thing that I definitely want to say to those who are graduating, especially in the time period that we're living in now. If you have an opportunity to do a rotational with organization, and just in case some are not familiar with that, there will be times where there may be something like a leadership development program or something like that, they'll call it. And in a rotational, what an organization will do is they'll allow you to come on as a full-time employee, sometimes even with benefits, and then you can literally rotate through the different departments that they have, and therefore you can pick up experience and training. You can interact with the professionals there, and then you can pick which, I don't want to say industry, but which field that you're most interested in based on the experience that you gain through that rotational. And these rotationals can be anywhere from 6 months to a year to as far as 2 years. So if you do see anything that says rotational, definitely take a look at it. And honestly, it really doesn't matter what organization is offering it, because it's a rotational. You'll get a piece of different types of departments and the different skills that they employ, and you'll be able to learn some things that you probably wouldn't be able to gain experience you wouldn't be able to gain otherwise. Definitely seconding internships. Can't say that enough. But I also want to say that for young college students, they shouldn't look lightly on clubs and organizations. Internships are definitely great, but you'll be very surprised what type of experience that you can gain by being a part of a club and organization. And definitely don't be afraid to start one. A lot of time, I think this generation more so than I was born yesterday, so just forget what I just said. But I do think the younger generation is a lot more apt to start something new. That's not something that older generations were so quick to do in mass, but starting something on your own and starting organization. If you see a need on campus and it's not being addressed, start an organization and address it. The experience of starting something new and bringing people on board, that is also definitely a transferable skill that can go in any profession, any industry, any corporation. It doesn't matter. So I would definitely say don't be afraid to start something new. Join those clubs. Josh mentioned this, volunteer. And something else I want to also double down on that Josh mentioned is it really does not matter what industry that you get this experience in. So you could be a musician or want to be a musician, and you could work at Deloitte and get experience that still will be transferable to you in a music career. So I would say not to worry so much about industry, and Josh kind of hit on this when he spoke about the transcripts and grades. Don't worry about major either. I have heard so many of our partners say, I'll give you a brief example of the insurance industry. They're in insurance, and of course the first thought that comes to a college student's mind is, oh, well, I didn't major in business, or I didn't major in economics. So that's the best tie-in I could figure I would need for insurance company. They literally look for humanities majors, and the reason why they do is they say they want the thinking process. So going to the critical thinking that's on NACE, they want the way that humanity majors think. And so definitely, I think it's important for young professionals and college students to understand, don't get so tied up in the major. Yes, the major means something, you gain the technical skills, but there are certain things that you can gain through the process of gaining that degree and through the internships and the fellowships. And Marina, thank you. I think it was Marina or Laura, I forgot which one, mentioned fellowships. That's a whole nother baby. But fellowships is something that's also in my department. If you have an opportunity to get a fellowship, that brings along the travel experience and brings along the opening your eyes to what diversity really is. when you start traveling abroad. And fellowships give you that opportunity to do so without coming so much out of pocket. You know, that's the whole point of fellowships. They pay for you to research, pay for you to travel. So if you have an opportunity to do a fellowship, definitely do one. Even the application process is a great learning experience. So I would definitely say echo everything you all said, Josh, definitely, and fellowships and club organizations, definitely.
Excellent. Did anybody else have anything to add in here? Laura?
Do you mind if I add something in as,
No.
So I do hire for internships. So this may be kind of a good perspective to dovetail, because I do hear a lot from students who are applying for internships or just in the recommendations we're making. So if you're trying to gain experience through through an internship, how do you even get the internship if you don't have experience to qualify you for that? So I just wanted to touch on what I look for when I'm accepting students into U360. And it's a slightly different situation because U360 is designed to, we kind of joke that it's like a professional development boot camp. Like it really is designed to prepare you for that first summer internship or the first job out of college. And so I'm looking for different things. What I'm looking for is, like I've accepted many students who have had no work experience, but can you articulate why you want to do this program, why you care about the issues that we're going to be working on? Do you have the passion? Do you have sort of that authentic reason for wanting to spend your time doing this and, and spending your time with us at Manomet? And then when it comes to work experience, though, one thing I would say to all college students is do not feel embarrassed about putting like restaurant experience on your resume. Like if all you've done is part-time work in the summer, put it on your resume. Like I've talked to a lot of students, when I interview them, they seem, really sort of uncomfortable, like I know I don't have any experience in this field, but I'm like, that's okay. This is what this is for, is to help you gain that experience. Like I've waited tables for years when I was younger. I know what is involved with working in the restaurant industry. So those are the kind of qualities that I want. Can you think on your feet? Are you good with customer service? Can you handle difficult situations? All of that comes from all different types of jobs with working with the public. And so that's probably my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to put the experience that you have on there, even if you don't think it relates to what it is that you're applying for. Because as Terry said, as Josh said, employers are looking for different things than you might expect. So like the insurance and humanities example, like people are looking for a lot of those competencies. Can you communicate well? Do you carry yourself well, and whatnot? So yeah, that's what I would say on that regard.
Excellent. So this question is for Marina and Laura. So studies show that a large percentage of millennials and Gen Z workers want an employer that is taking action on environmental or social issues. If a young professional's job isn't in the sustainability field, how can they affect those kinds of changes in their workplace?
Yeah, I guess, well, one of the things I learned a while back is that you can bring sustainability kind of anywhere you go. And while I was fortunate with my first job out of school being promoting plant-based products, which was kind of like right in line with what I wanted to do, and I didn't really have to search far and wide to try to bring sustainability to my workplace. I got a chance to think through this question and think about what I would do. And I think specifically if you can, first make sure that you can do your job well once you get it. And then if you see areas in your company or organization for improvement, whether it's environmentally or having the organization be more socially inclusive, think about kind of what ways maybe you could tackle that challenge, maybe bounce ideas off of your teammates and kind of develop somewhat of a business proposal that you can bring to leadership, and try to remember that leaders in companies and organizations, if the environmental and social things are not there, it's not because they don't care necessarily, but because they're busy, and maybe you're doing them a huge favor by having a plan and coming up with something that could really benefit the whole organization.
That was great. Those are great suggestions. I would say my answer sort of can depend on what size company you're working for or what type of organization. So with larger companies, there are often employee resource groups or ERGs. And if you think of that sort of like the student clubs and activities of college, but in a workplace, so you can have, diversity groups, you can have, women professionals, you can have the green team. So there, it's kind of groups and committees of your colleagues that are all kind of coming together around these issues. So you could certainly participate in one of those, or as Terry said, think of like starting it, how you may have started a club in college, you can do the same thing within your workplace. If you are seeing a gap where maybe there's a social issue or environmental impact within the company that you don't feel is being addressed as much as it could be, be the one to start one of these green teams or start the committee. And then the other thing I would say is when we were talking before about soft skills and the importance of communication, I know we focused a lot on sort of the mechanics of communication, but another facet that is so important is how effectively you communicate your ideas and your thoughts. So that's another thing that I would really encourage people to think about is if you're seeing gaps, like I said, whether it's environmental, sustainability, or social impact, and you, as Marina mentioned, may not be because they're intentionally trying to pollute or something, that it may just be a lack of time or a lack of awareness or whatnot. Think about how you can communicate your ideas in a way that will get your employer excited too. That just by and large, people don't tend to respond. Nobody really responds well to having, things sort of demanded of them or kind of, coming on a little too aggressively or whatnot. So talking about it in a way that could talk about the benefits to the company, to the employees, always to the business's bottom line is really helpful when you're talking about environmental initiatives. So most, if not all, environmental initiatives also save the company money, and that's a really good way to talk about these issues with your employers if you feel like there may be some sort of resistance coming from leadership or whatnot. So those are some suggestions I would have.
Terry, Josh, do you have anything else to add, especially on maybe how you could increase diversity in your workplace?
I'll just add something that's obvious, but not so obvious. For diversity, if you notice that there's a lack of diversity, and I want to preface by saying this, a lot of times when people say diversity, the first thing they think about is racial or cultural demographics. When I say diversity, I mean diversity across all realms. So not just whether or not you have enough Black, white, Latino, Asian, whether or not, I mean diversity in terms of gender, sexuality, preferences, perspectives, geographic, I mean diversity across all lenses. So I first have to preference that because again, especially in the times that we're living in, the first thing we think of diversity is, how many Black, how many white, how many, we think that way, but it includes all of that. So I'll first say that. So the first thing that I would say that a lot of people kind of shy away from is that when it comes to diversity, if you notice a lack of it in any particular area in a corporation, mention it, bring it up. And then that's where the effective communication that Laura mentioned is so very key. You do have to pay attention to how you bring up certain topics, know the culture and the environment of the workplace that you're in. And then that would be very helpful for you to understand, okay, how should I address this? Certain organizations, you have a CEO where you can literally knock on the door and say, hey, this is bothering me. I think you should do something about it. And they'll go, thank you so much for mentioning that to me. And then you have other organizations where they'll look at you as if you have a frog on your head. So you have to figure out what is the culture of the workplace that you are? What is that culture? Make sure you appreciate that. What are the ways that people get things done? If there is a touchy subject that people want to shy away from and they don't want to address the elephant in the room, then how do you get that elephant addressed? So this is where communication just can't get away from it. This is where this is key. This is where you do have those conversations. I think Marina mentioned it, having those conversations with your colleagues. If you've been there for 2 years, talk to someone who's been there for 5 and ask them what they've noticed. And even if they're a person who isn't very proactive in getting things done, there's still a lot you can learn from what they haven't done and why they haven't done that. And so it's important to know the culture of the place where you are. But even if it's a culture that doesn't seem to be so receptive to those type of things, even if that's true, still bring it up. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it and what's the best way to do it. And in a lot of cases, and Daniel, I think you mentioned this, sometimes things haven't happened just because no one feels like they can happen, and just no one mentioned it before, no one thought of it before. So you could be that person to bring it up. So I would definitely just add that part to it. One, just don't be afraid to mention, but the way that you do it is essential, because it could be a great idea, but if it's not mentioned in the an appropriate way, or just mentioned in a way that fits the culture of the organization, then it's lost.
Yeah, I agree. And to piggyback off that, Terry, and I think this is part of what you're saying, but I think also, like, don't be afraid. I think folks we all need to just educate ourselves, right? So whether it's, finding, a book to read, or articles on the topic, or joining, a group or an organization, at NJCU, we're blessed to have, one of the most diverse student populations across the country. Jersey City is the third most diverse city in the nation, and our students, our population reflect that. But, with that said, there are still, while our students are diverse, it's really important that the faculty is diverse as well, right? And that the employers that we work with, have diverse representation. And so I'm learning, and I'm committed to being a change agent and to growing. And so that means reading and joining organizations. And hey, if a club or an organization doesn't exist, like, I think a few folks had mentioned, then build it, create it, identify some folks, some allies, and people who could be on board. And just by talking about these topics, you can learn and you can grow and you can build, things out. So yeah, really important stuff.
Excellent. And I think this is just important advice for all of us, no matter what point we are in our careers. You can always be learning something new, or suggesting new ideas, or making change in your workplace. We do have a question from an audience member. So they would like to know, what is the best way to demonstrate your interpersonal qualities to employers? And I think this could be any point during the maybe the job application or interview process to, your early days in the workplace.
I'll go. That's a loaded question. There's so many different ways to do it. I'll pick one that I don't want to forget. So even though this is the one I want to speak to, this is one I'll just pick. So first, I was thinking about resumes. I think Laura said something that made me think about resumes. About the restaurant experience is what you were saying, Laura. Communicating on your resume first is very, very key. And I won't speak to a great deal about this because that's not really the gist of the question, but I would say definitely visit your career center and use that writing center and that resume center. They will have your resume in tip-top shape, and then have someone else look at it after that. But that's one way that you can communicate what your interpersonal skills are, what your soft skills are, by using the proper, I always say action verbs, because it kind of gets to the point of what you're trying to do, but using the proper action verbs on your resume. So I'll just mention that for those that are looking to get the job. Once you're there, I would definitely say seek any opportunity that is presented to you. It may be an opportunity to lead a community. It may be an opportunity to head up some program or event, or it may not even be an opportunity to lead or to head up something. It could be just an opportunity to assist. Sometimes people will ask, sometimes people will not. But I would just say one way to definitely show what your skills are is to seek an opportunity to get involved, to help someone with a project, to reach out and ask. Again, a lot of times people will have things that they may need assistance on, but sometimes people aren't so keen on asking for help for such a variety number of reasons, but definitely seek an opportunity to do something. And that's one way you can definitely show your skills. Don't be afraid to speak up if there's an opportunity where you're in a board meeting, what have you, have an idea. Sometimes people are intimidated, especially if you're on the younger end in a career field. You may feel intimidated because you're surrounded by people with so much experience. You may not feel qualified enough. Imposter syndrome is a thing. So you may feel that you're not qualified enough or you don't have enough experience. Not true. Again, this is another part of diversity. Young versus old. That's diversity. You need all perspectives. So don't be afraid to share an opinion and don't feel like you're not qualified enough to lend that lens. So that is another way where you can definitely share your qualities. So speak up, ask for assistance yourself, offer assistance as well. So these are some very simple things that you can do that can show what your interpersonal skills are.
Laura?
So I kind of where I'm thinking with this question is in order to be able to show your interpersonal skills to your employers and within the workplace, you first have to get hired for that job. So I'm going to start kind of at that beginning of how to present yourself in the application and the interview. Absolutely everything that's been said about your resume, your cover letter, having, you know, other eyes on it and whatnot. But I would say in the interview piece, you know, that's such an important part, because if you can't communicate one-on-one with the person who's interviewing you, they're not going to feel confident that you can, you know, communicate with your colleagues or with potential clients or whatnot. And I know how nerve-wracking interviews can be, especially if you're starting out in the workforce. So if that's something that you know would make you even more nervous, you know, that's where some of those classes, like taking a public speaking class in school, can really help. But practicing with your friends, practicing with you know, if you have a parent's friend who works in HR or something, just any way that you can get that comfort level up, and just reminding yourself to just be yourself. Like if you have interpersonal skills, let them come out. You know, don't let nerves block that. You know, do whatever you can to not let nerves block that. But another just very simple one is make sure that you are thanking the person who interviewed you. Send a thank you note afterwards. Be courteous and gracious in your correspondence with them. People don't respond well when your emails or inquiries sound kind of demanding, or that you know, it's like people want to feel appreciated too, and for their time that they've taken to talk with you. So show that interest, show that genuine excitement about the position. And if you have the interpersonal skills, they will come out. And I would just say trying to do various exercises or things that you can to break down those blockades that could prevent them from coming out, because that's the worst feeling. Like if you're somebody who is not, you know, not as comfortable in those situations, knowing that you have it, like you have what they're looking for, and you would bring a lot to the table, having those things, whether it's self-doubt or nerves or lack of confidence, whatever it is, that is a terrible feeling to have that be the reason that you're not getting an opportunity that you could be perfect for. So whatever sort of personal growth opportunities that you can have, I would also highly recommend seeking those out. Do the things that scare you. Find opportunities that will push you out of your comfort zone so you can build the confidence to back up your interpersonal skills.
I just want to add another opportunity folks can take advantage of, Toastmasters Club. You can look them up. I'm sure they've transitioned to a virtual format as well. So that's another way that you can practice your elevator pitch, practice mock interview with a career services professional, a faculty member. There's software that you can utilize that can, pepper you with questions. So practice is key. Once you land the job, I think as Terry had mentioned, like just be active, separate yourself from your peers or previous interns so that the decision makers say, wow, that person really sticks out. That person's exceptional. And then also take advantage of opportunities to connect with folks outside of work. I know it's difficult now, but I know a lot of companies are doing virtual happy hours, or when we're back in person, grab lunch with somebody or grab coffee with somebody. It's also just a good way to connect and let people get to know who you are.
That's excellent. So you kind of touched on the fact that we are all working remotely right now. So I was wondering, before we head off today, if you had any specific advice for people who are entering the workforce for the first time and from a remote position. How do you build those relationships with your coworkers when you may not have met them face to face? What should you wear on your first day of work when you are not leaving your house? Anybody have any tips?
Well, I've had the somewhat fortunate, I guess, for this conversation experience of applying for jobs during the pandemic and actually getting one. Thank you, NBRC. So for me, I guess, first of all, the interview process is interesting because you're not necessarily going to come and meet the team or see an office space. And I guess I don't have any recommendations because I haven't seen our office space yet. But it's really interesting, and I was thinking about it the other day. The only time I've really seen all my colleagues is together, and a couple of them are online right now, is together online like this. So imagine you're in your office, and every time you see each other, you're all looking at everyone, and you're only like one at a time speaking. It's a very different social environment than in an office space. So I would say, to your point, Josh, just make time to meet with people one-on-one, whether it's via Zoom or on the phone, or maybe you meet them outside or something, to just really connect with people again and try to, build those relationships, because you'll be working with those people every day for the foreseeable future, right? But it's definitely different, and I'm still learning for sure.
Can I add something to that too? So this is the first year that U360 has been 100% virtual. I mean, it was about 98% before this, but the exception being that I would kick off the program on students' campuses. And there was something really important about having FaceTime from day one, and then we go to virtual from there. So this year was the first time I, have students that I've never met in person. And I would say, to add to what Marina said, one thing that can be really helpful is just when you're having meetings, start the meetings with like 5 minutes of social, like something. Like I started doing this thing this year that I heard on a podcast when the pandemic started. The two hosts, when they went virtual, they started doing temp checks to kind of play on us having to check our temperature. And it was just like a random question. So like there was one that I asked that was like, if you had to choose chocolate, sweet, or salty, what would you be? It's just like little funny questions to get to know each other. And so just remember that we don't have that like casual talking in the kitchen or going to someone's desk and just chatting with them. I have colleagues where I have just like a half-hour desk chat once a week where it's like, let's just catch up on things that not related to work. Let's talk about how our weekend was and whatnot. So really making time for those social connections is so important.
Thank you. So we are coming to the end of our time here today. So I just wanted to ask each one of our panelists, what advice do you have? What's your one top piece of advice that you'd like to give people entering the workforce today?
Well, I'm already unmuted, so I'll jump in first. I would say building your network is the most important thing that I know we've talked about communication and various things, but who you like so much about getting your first jobs or other subsequent jobs is so much about who you know or connections that might be able to introduce you to somebody. So build, anything you can do, whether it's reaching out to professionals in the field that you want, asking them if you could have coffee with them, pick their brain, do internships and programs that will help you build a professional network, talk to your parents and your parents' friends. And then building on something I think Josh said earlier, don't ever overlook any potential opportunity. You never know where something's going to lead. Like I felt like I was kind of floundering in some jobs after college, but they all ended up leading to this, so you never know where an opportunity is going to take you. So seize them.
Yeah. And Laura, I'll piggyback on something you just said. And with regard to the networking, always put your best foot forward. It's about quality, it's about quality, not quantity. So don't just go connecting with anybody and everybody on LinkedIn. Send a customized message, introducing yourself or reminding the individual as to who you are. Even if it could be a professor or a classmate, remind them as to who you are, because they might get a lot of these requests. It's really important to personalize them and just put your best foot forward. Like I mentioned before, you don't want to have typos in the introduction. You want to be that professional, that you are, and utilize the LinkedIn platform for that, and put your best foot forward and gain that experience, build that network, and utilize the resources that are available to you, career services, your own network. Don't overlook anybody,
And then Daniel, I also add patience. Just be patient. I will say something else, panels like this. So if you connect with someone, even if you never say anything to them face to face, if someone spoke to you in some kind of way, find them on LinkedIn, send that message that Josh was mentioning, but make sure you put that connection in there. So, hey, I saw your panel on, put the date, the time, just to make sure that they understand that there's a connection. I was wondering if you had a moment too. So there's a bunch of like little tutorials that you can look at. So that's another point to resources that you can look at, how to craft a message on LinkedIn, how to reach out to someone blindly when you're trying to ask them for information or what have you. And then you can also offer, hey, I'd like to meet with you to fill in the blanks. And you can also offer what you can offer that person as well. Sometimes connecting, networking isn't always about what you can get from someone. Sometimes it's also what you can offer. And that's also another way that you can network. And then one more thing that I'll say is, if you're interested in a particular company in a particular industry, hawk their website. Look, sometimes there are resources on the website that they'll give you. Someone mentioned, I think, HireVue in a question. So there's some companies like Bank of America, Deloitte, they'll offer some resources on their website to help prep you for their interview process, because they want to make sure to get quality people. So if you are concerned about how to come across on like HireVue and the other case study interview type things, hawk the website, you'll find resources, they'll help you prep. So that's another thing that you can do while you're looking for a job in this type of environment.
I'll just add, as someone that's always very nervous to go into interviews and look for jobs, that kind of try not to get in your head so much and not be afraid to make mistakes, because they'll happen. And oftentimes mistakes kind of open a window of showing some vulnerability that can actually be very relatable for someone that's interviewing you, and kind of open up a conversation, and maybe they even remember you more. You stand out that way. So yeah, take it easy.
Thank you all. That's a great advice, and you shared so much. I'll pass along one additional piece of advice that comes from Lizzie Schuler, Manomet's president. She recommends using Zoom and recording yourself presenting or answering questions, just to make sure that you could see that. And so that's a really useful tool that you can use while you need to do remote interviews. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Our panelists have been amazing and have shared so many great tips. And I look forward to sending you an email after this presentation so you can go back and review and watch this again. And I hope that you do share it with all of your friends or any other young professionals in your life. If you happen to be a college student in the Northeast who is seeking opportunities, I'm going to add a link in our chat here to learn more about our U360 internship program. We are currently accepting applications, and now you know to address any of your correspondence to Laura Babb, our program manager, and to make sure you don't use any typos. So the information and link is there in your chat, and please follow up if you have any additional questions. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.